Fellas, last night we had UFC Saudi Arabia, probably the most stacked fight night we've had this year. I mean, coming into it, it was really good on paper, and it definitely performed from top to bottom. There were just bangers on this card, and there's just a lot to talk about on this card. So we're going to be matchmaking every single fighter on this main card. Whoever won, whoever lost, every fighter on that main card, we're going to be matchmaking into fights that I think would be bangers, fighters that make sense, and just fights that I need to see in the UFC from the guys that competed on the main card of UFC Saudi Arabia. So let me know your thoughts on that card and these matchups that I've got right here, but we'll go in there with the first fight. Johnny Walker versus Volkan Oezdemir. Volkan Oezdemir delivered a brutal first round KO to Johnny Walker. Now, we'll start off with the loser, Johnny Walker. Now, listen, as a Johnny Walker fan, I don't want to see this dude face anyone else in the top 10 because I just can't bear watching this guy get brutally chinned again. So I think for Johnny Walker, we should give him Bogdan Guskov. Bogdan Guskov, no, it's not Anthony Smith. It's actually his separate identity. He's coming off two finishes, some really good wins as well, coming off a former ranked opponent in Ryan Spann. And in his UFC debut, he also got finished by Volkan Oezdemir. He has a ton of hype to his name known as Bogdan. And I think him versus Johnny Walker should be next because Bogdan, he's ranked number 12th. He needs a big opportunity. He needs a top 10 fight. And I think Johnny Walker, who's coming off two losses, is that perfect fight for Bogdan to progress into the top 10 and begin his road to the title shot. But for Johnny Walker, it's still a winnable fight for him, and it's still a chance for him to defend his space in the top 10. So I think Johnny Walker versus Bogdan Guskov should be next in the light heavyweight division. And I don't want to hear anyone say Johnny Walker versus Carlos Ulberg, because unless you're trying to get Johnny Walker out the UFC as fast as possible, that is quite possibly the worst matchup for Johnny Walker. You've got Johnny Walker with no chin versus the most dangerous prospect in the light heavyweight division in Carlos Ulberg. No, thank you. Let's do Johnny Walker versus Bogdan Guskov next in the light heavyweight division. Then for the winner, Volkan Oezdemir, coming off that really good win over Johnny Walker, I think he should face Jan Blachowicz next. Now, Volkan Oezdemir, he's faced a lot of these guys already in the light heavyweight division. He's faced Yuri, Ankalaev, Rakic, Nikita Krylov, and obviously now he's just beaten Johnny Walker as well. So for Volkan Oezdemir, I think him versus Jan Blachowicz is the fight that we should make next. There might be a few people that think this is quite a big step up from Johnny Walker all the way to Jan Blachowicz, a former champion, but Jan Blachowicz hasn't looked great recently. Obviously, at UFC 291, he lost to Alex Pereira. Before that, he had the draw with Magomed Ankalaev in, which should have probably gone in favour of Ankalaev. Before that, he fought Alexander Rakic, in which he won, but it was an injury, so did he really win? And then before that, he faced Glover Teixeira and obviously got submitted by a 40-odd-year-old Glover Teixeira and lost his belt. So for Jan Blachowicz, he needs a win that can finally get him some momentum and push him closer to that, title shot and start matchmaking him against those top 5 guys again. So I think we should give Volkan Oezdemir a chance. He's got 2 wins now in a row, one to Bogdan and one to Johnny Walker that we've just seen, and he needs to step up in competition. So let's do Volkan Oezdemir versus Jan Blachowicz. And by the way, this would be a banger of a fight. 2 dangerous kickboxers in the light heavyweight division who also have a decent grappling base. I think this is stylistically a really fun fight, and I can't believe we haven't seen this fight yet. So Volkan Oezdemir versus Jan Blachowicz, in my opinion, should be next in the light heavyweight division. And then we'll go on to the next fight, which was Sharputa Magomedov versus Antonio Tricoli. Sharputa Magomedov did exactly what we expected him to do and got the TKO in round 3 against Antonio Tricoli. For Antonio Tricoli, I think he should be cut from the UFC. I don't know how the UFC found. I mean, he was on the Contender Series a few years ago, back in 2019. Didn't have the best performance, and then they brought him back on short notice, I assume to give Sharputa Magomedov a free win, and Tricoli didn't look good in that fight. And I know he wasn't supposed to win the fight. He was only matched up against Sharputa Magomedov to give Magomedov a free win. It wasn't like anyone expected him to win, but he looked horrible, man. On the feet, I don't recall him throwing a single strike in that fight. I don't really have any interest in seeing him fight again. So for Antonio Tricoli, maybe if he builds himself up in the regional scene here, maybe he can get a chance at the UFC again. But for right now, let's just not see this guy in the highest level of the UFC. And then for Sharputa Magomedov, I've heard a few people say Sharputa Magomedov versus Bo Nickal should be next. I don't want to see that fight. On paper, fair enough, it's 2 undefeated middleweight prospects. It might be fun to see, but the fight is going to happen. And Bo Nickal, you've got the best wrestler, unranked wrestler at middleweight versus the guy with 0 takedown defense. No. Bo Nickal is going to take Sharputa Magomedov down and dominate him. That's the only reason he called for the fight. So I think we should see Sharputa Magomedov versus Bruno Ferreira. This would be a really fun fight to see. If you're not familiar with Bruno Ferreira, essentially, he is an extremely hard hitter. This guy is an extremely powerful middleweight. He's coming off 2 brutal KOs, and in his last fight, he got a highlight reel KO of Dustin Stoltzfus as well. His only loss is to Nursultan Ruziboyev, and we know how good that guy is. So I think we should do Bruno Ferreira versus Sharputa Magomedov. You've got Sharputa Magomedov, undefeated, crafty kickboxer in the middleweight division, who just pieces people up with his kickboxing, and then Bruno Ferreira, an absolute absolute animal. This dude is a monster, and he packs a punch. This should be a really, really fun fight between the two of them. I can almost guarantee it's going to end in a finish. This would be a stand-up war. So for Shavkat Magomedov, I want to see him versus Bruno Ferreira next. And then the next fight on the card, we had Kelvin Gastelum versus Daniel Rodriguez. Kelvin Gastelum got the win by decision in what was a somewhat competitive fight, but obviously D-Rod kind of got exhausted. Now, we'll start off with Daniel Rodriguez, the loser. Daniel Rodriguez is in a bit of a weird position. He keeps consistently losing. He's on a 3-fight losing streak now, 2 of them coming by way of finish. So I think for Daniel Rodriguez, we should see him versus Jake Matthews. It's been quite a long time before we've seen Daniel Rodriguez get a good win, because he beat Li Jingliang, but it was a very controversial win. And then before that, he beat Kevin Lee. Jake Matthews is kind of on and off. Sometimes he'll win, sometimes he'll lose. He's just got that good win over Phil Rowe at UFC 302. And he's also beaten Li Jingliang. So I think D-Rod versus Jake Matthews, that could be quite a fun fight. It's a good opportunity for Jake Matthews as well. So that is what I think should happen next for Daniel Rodriguez. And then for Kelvin Gastelum, I don't want to see him fight at 170 because he's probably not going to make weight. No surprise, he's a human refrigerator. And I think middleweight is just his natural base anyway. I want to see Kelvin Gastelum back in the middleweight division. And no, I don't want to see him face a ranked opponent. I know he beat Chris Curtis in the middleweight division, but he doesn't deserve a ranked opponent when he's consistently, missing weight and messing up the UFC. And he's lost to half the guys in the middleweight division as well. So I think for Kelvin Gastelum, we should see him versus the winner of Joe Pyfer and Marc-Andre Barriault. This should be the winner. I think the winner of that fight should face Kelvin Gastelum. They're going to be taking each other on this week at UFC 303. So it's not like we have to wait a while for that fight. Now, if Marc-Andre Barriault wins, obviously he's coming off a good win over Joe Pyfer. He might have lost to Chris Curtis as well, but Marc-Andre Barriault will be a test for Kelvin Gastelum. And if he does beat Joe Pyfer, that's a really good win for him. And I think this fight could be really interesting. And then if Joe Pyfer wins, you've got the new up-and-coming guy in Joe Pyfer. He might have lost to Jack Hermansson, but if he can beat Andre Barriault, he's, one of the hardest-hitting middleweight prospects in the UFC. Put him against Kelvin Gastelum, also hits really hard. He's been around the middleweight division for the long time. The new guy versus the old guy. The winner of this fight gets a ranked opponent. Kelvin Gastelum versus Joe Pyfer is what I think Kelvin Gastelum and Daniel Rodriguez should do next in their career. Then we've got Sergey Pavlovich versus Alexander Volkov. Volkov shocked the world, got the decision over Sergey Pavlovich, For Sergey Pavlovich, he's kind of lost a bit of his hype. He's on a 2-fight losing streak. He got KO'd by Tom Aspinall and then dominated by Alexander Volkov. So for Sergey Pavlovich, I think he should face the winner of Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak. Now, Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak got official for a fight night later this year. They're going to be taking each other on, and I think the winner of that fight should face Sergey Pavlovich. Now, even though, we'll start off if Marcin Tybura wins. If Marcin Tybura wins, even though on paper this looks like an easy fight for Sergey Pavlovich, people underestimate Marcin Tybura, man. Like, if he does beat Sergey Spivak, he'd have been on a 2-fight winning streak, finished Tatu Ivaza in the first round, beat Sergey Spivak. And I feel like a lot of people like to just completely disregard Marcin Tybura just because he's a fat heavyweight. Now, he's also lost to Tom Aspinall just like Sergey Pavlovich. Pavlovich needs to step down in competition, so I think him versus Tybura could be a decent fight. And then if Sergey Spivak wins, it's Sergey versus Sergey. Spivak's bringing the grappling base, Pavlovich is bringing the striking base. And if he can beat Tybura, he'd have won 2 out of his last 3. The only guy that he's lost to is one of the best heavyweights in Cyril Gane. And yeah, this could also be an interesting fight because of the clash of styles. So for Sergey Pavlovich, rather than seeing him matched up against the top guys now, I think we need to give one of these other guys a chance. So the winner of Marcin Tybura and Sergey Spivak should face Sergey Pavlovich, in my opinion. And then for Alexander Volkov, Volkov's faced a lot of the top guys in the heavyweight division. He's faced Tom Aspinall, he's faced Curtis Blades, and he's faced Cyril Gane already. But I think he should rematch Cyril Gane. Now, obviously, it can't be Blades and Aspinall because they're going to be fighting for the belt soon. So I think Volkov versus Cyril Gane, fight night main event later this year in Paris. I think this should be the fight. Alexander Volkov's on a 4-fight winning streak, 3 of them coming by way of finish, and one of them being a decision win over Sergey Pavlovich, which was super impressive. And Cyril Gane, he's had 2 title shots, failed both of them, but he's been able to clear everyone else out, and he's coming off a win over Sergey Spivak, and both of these guys are in that position where they're both like 1 win away from getting a title shot. So I think Volkov versus Cyril Gane, rematch them in Paris, main event, winner gets to fight against the winner of Aspinall and Blades. So Volkov versus Cyril Gane, super competitive fight on the feet, and with the way that Volkov has been looking recently, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes out there and beats Cyril Gane as well. So Volkov, Gane, let's see that fight in a main event in Paris later this year. And then we've got the final main event, Robert Whittaker versus Ikram Aliskerov. Whittaker put Ikram Aliskerov to sleep in that first round. Now, for Ikram Aliskerov, the problem with Aliskerov is we don't know how good this guy is, because every unranked fighter that he's faced, he's dominated. He's just destroyed every unranked fighter that he's gone against. But then the elite fighters that he has gone against in Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker, he's been chinned by both of them. So we need to fight where we can kind of gauge how good he really is. So I think we should do Ikram Aliskerov versus Roman Kopylov. Roman Kopylov is also in that space where he's unranked and he has lost to a ranked opponent in Anthony Hernandez and he got finished by him. So maybe he's not good enough for the rankings, but he's definitely good enough to piece up these unranked guys. Both of these guys at one point were super big middleweight prospects. It's a really fun fight on paper as well. You've got Roman Kopylov, really good kickboxer, who seems to have improved his grappling recently. He definitely has what it takes to chin Ikram Aliskerov with the way that Ikram Aliskerov's been performing recently. And for Ikram Aliskerov, he definitely has what it takes to submit Roman Kopylov with what we saw with Kopylov and Hernandez. So I think we should do Ikram Aliskerov versus Roman Kopylov. Really fun fight on paper. It should be a really fun fight, and I think the winner of this fight should be able to get a ranked opponent, because we don't really know how good these guys are, because they've both just dominated everyone when it comes to unranked fighters, but then the ranked fighters that they have faced, they've lost to. So Aliskerov versus Roman Kopylov should be next in my opinion. And then finally, Robert Whittaker. For Robert Whittaker, I think he should face Sean Strickland for a #1 contender fight. The winner of this fight undoubtedly gets a title shot, because obviously we've got Israel Adesanya fighting for the belt at UFC 305, and then both of these guys are in that position where they can definitely get a title shot next. Sean Strickland's come off that win over Paulo Costa, but it was quite an uneventful fight. Before that, he had the title shot against Dricus du Plessis, super competitive fight that he lost, and then before that, he got a really good win over Israel Adesanya. And now Robert Whittaker, he also got finished by Dricus du Plessis at UFC 290, but he's coming off 2 wins, also to Paulo Costa and to Ikram Aliskerov. And I think Whittaker versus Strickland is a really fun fight to make. On the feet, it's a super high-level striking matchup. It's a winnable fight for both of them, especially from how good they've been looking recently. And the winner of this fight, undoubtedly, give them a title shot. If Whittaker doesn't want to face Sean Strickland, I think we should just let him wait and get a title shot, because I think Whittaker at this point, he's KO'd Ikram Aliskerov. He's beaten Paulo Costa. He's one of the greatest middleweights of all time. If Whittaker wants to take some time off and just wait for a title shot, I think we should let him. Have Sean Strickland fight the winner of Dricus and Adesanya, and then have Whittaker face whoever the middleweight champion is at the time. So that is who I think every fighter on UFC Saudi Arabia's main card should face next. Some fights that I think will be bangers, fights that I think make the most sense. So let me know your thoughts on these matchups, and thank you for watching.